And then when I pick up this leg, pretty much everything else just drives down. I think if I had a wall behind me and I'm able to just kind of stay all the way down this wall and that tension just comes in and I'm able to just kind of finish through.
Got him. 2-2. Swing.
2-pitch. Swing and a miss.
So one thing I've always wondered, like before we even started working together, how did the coil come about for you? Did you always throw that way? And I'm really interested in what are you trying to do or what are you feeling when you do that first move? What are you trying to accomplish?
Yeah, so I kind of grew that way my whole entire life. You know, watching baseball as a kid, you always want to emulate one of the guys you really looked up to. D-Train was one of the guys that I really enjoyed watching. He always had that high leg kick and it was just like super aggressive. And for me, I never threw hard as, you know, even just through, I didn't get really thrown hard until pro ball. So I had to figure out different ways to kind of level me up to where I could still compete. And, you know, as a kid, my dad wouldn't let me throw anything really but a fastball. So I didn't really have any slider. I didn't have a curveball or anything like that to really throw guys off on. So my job and what I thought I had to do was change angles. So I was throwing fastballs from here all the way up to here, and I was just letting it rip. So with that, I added up the coil, which then helped me get to different arm slots, right? So one of the things that I thought about was, you know, just in general of how you get down the mound is it kind of helped me preset my hip to where I could kind of have that direction go straight towards the mound. So being able to kind of stay this way. Now the height, it was kind of just like natural ability to get that high, but for me, I was really just trying to kind of stay, like if we're on this mound, it's really just trying to stay closed off, but being able to kind of simplify the mechanics of it, right? So like if I'm already preset my hip closed, my thought process was I can just pick my leg up and I'm already in that good position. And obviously when I kind of learned more through pitching and kind of moved up my ways, like I kind of redefined that a little bit more. But you know, essentially the basic movement is pick your leg up and get in there. So pretty much for me is obviously adding the deception, which as a kid I wasn't really thinking too much about deception, but I knew it was different. So giving a different look, D-Train, getting in there, but then able to just kind of ride that hip all the way straight down the mound to where when the foot strike, everything just goes.
So when you lift your leg and you get into that coil, are you thinking more just bring the leg back, or are you thinking bring the belt back?
I would say both. I would say early on it was thinking just get the leg up. I was thinking about driving the knees straight back to simplify that, but as I kind of learned a little bit more, it's more of like trying to keep that pelvis straight, but also kind of tuck it at the same time, if that makes sense. Yeah.
And does that feel like an effortless move? Like, do you feel like you're just kind of like floating and lifting, or do you feel like is there already like tension in this back hip as you're going, or does this feel just like kind of hanging out passively and you're just turning into it?
So like I mentioned before, like when I first started, it was just kind of like relaxed, pick it up and just go. As we kind of learned more about, you know, the way my body works and the way that I was able to kind of be efficient through the mound, I started to load this back glute a little bit more to where like I still have the tension here, and then when I pick up this leg, pretty much everything else just drives down, and then I'm still able to kind of stay activated in my glute. You know, early on there was a lot of times where my glute wasn't activated, so that led me to a lot of problems getting down the mound. Having that active glute puts me into a more powerful position. It was just this leg straight, just pick it up, but I still had tension in that glute to where I was able to drive down.
And so I think back to 2022, summer 2022, we kind of linked up, looked through like maybe what was going wrong at the time. But to your point there, like, can you show like what you're doing before with like how you were coming set versus the preset now?
Yeah, I want to say I erased it from my memory so long, so I don't remember exactly how I was, but I want to say, yeah, like my instincts just drive me back to that glute firing, so like I can't remember exactly how it was.
No, I do remember you were a little bit narrow and you were very much like in the quad.
Yeah.
And then again, just being able to find the heel, find the glute in your set position.
Yeah.
We can put it side by side for people to just kind of see, but like you're telling me like, hey, I just kind of feel like my quad's really active, like I'm not really finding my butt anymore.
Yeah.
And it was like kind of as simple as just getting you more into your glute coming set.
Yes.
So just simplify everything.
There you go.
So when you come out of your coil down the mound, you kind of mentioned that your goal is to like kind of stay close.
Yeah.
So take me through the stride phase. So you're not trying to get your hips open necessarily. You're just trying to ride close as long as you can.
Yeah, so for me, you know, obviously we're getting to the gather, glutes activated. As I'm coming hip up, and I'm pretty much, my theory of it is, think if I had a wall behind me and I'm able to just kind of stay all the way down this wall and kind of ride my backside all the way down that wall. And then once foot strike comes, since I'm already closed and I'm staying as long as possible, I'm creating that, you know, that hip shoulder separation, and that tension just comes in, and I'm able to just kind of finish through to where everything just follows through this way.
And your goal obviously still is rotate
Yes.
down. You're
Down,
thinking
not
this,
around.
even though you're going to be a little more crossbody.
Yes.
Do you ever find yourself getting too crossbody, where you feel your stride really taking you over here, and that starts to affect your release?
I would say a few times, but not really, just because that's kind of where I've always really gravitated to, is that closed off landing spot. I would say there's a lot of times where I would try to kind of open up a little bit more, and I wasn't able to kind of get that torque or that shoulder.
You could tell that throughout the timing when you tried to stay more
Exactly.
directional.
Yeah, so when I was able to kind of stay closed off a little bit more. Now you have to be very intentional with where your toes pointed, because that makes a difference. Because if you're here, now that closes off your hip. So you kind of want to get a little bit, you got to find that happy medium, right? So where you're kind of going down and you're able to still get to that spot where all that tension's able to come back up.
And when you're super synced up, everything's clicking, like, do you feel like your arm is a really active part of the throw, or do you feel like it's totally along for the ride and like everything's coming from the lower half?
Yeah, no, the arm is definitely for the ride. I don't really think anything at all with the arm. I think there's a lot of times when you try to throw hard, you think arm, when you know, it's really the opposite, where you're trying to get pretty much the lower half's your foundation, and everything else just builds up from there.
Well, I tell guys, like, the arm definitely is part of like where your velocity comes from, but it'll be there when it needs to be there.
Yeah.
If you bring it in too soon, now you just bypassed all this potential velo from the lower half, from the core. Sure, like, guys can throw 80 with just their arm, like,
Sure.
But like if you want to throw 100, like, where's that other 20 miles an hour coming
Yep.
from? Like, it's how well do you use the rest of your body?
Exactly.
Okay, I know we have a couple minutes left. Bullpen routine.
Yep.
Take me through your thought process, like, let's say start of the game to when you come in the game, or even like once you start kind of warming up in the pen.
Yeah.
How do you flip that switch?
For me, it's you know, right around the 5th, 6th inning. It kind of switches, but mostly it's right around those innings. I start getting into my stretching routine, which goes through just some basic, like, in-range, you know, stretches, and then from there it's activation. I need to make sure all my muscles are firing, they're activated and ready to go. So I'll go through some hip activations with some mini bands. I'll go through a series where I'll be laying on the ground, just get my hips, get my glutes firing, do band work, and go through my plyo routine. So that will take me right around the 7th-ish inning. And from there, just kind of run back and forth, back pedals, making sure everything's rocking. And then from that point on, the switch is kind of starting to starting to switch up and turn on. So yeah, from there.
Do you throw are you going to like play light catch in the 7th or 8th inning, no matter, or do you just wait till the game situation calls for it, and then you're just not even touching the ball unless you actually start getting the goal?
So the only throws I'm making are the plyo throws, and that's the plyo routine that I go through, and just ripping 7.5 ounce balls. I'll do some reverse throws, but yeah, in 162 games, you don't want to waste bullets. So my thought process is throwing before that, you're just wasting bullets. So if my name gets called and it comes into the situation, you know, I'll throw probably 4 or 5 crow hop throws from the backside of the mound all the way down to get me warmed up, and then I go straight into my pitch routine.
How many pitches do you throw in the bullpen before coming in the game, typically?
You know, this is varied a lot. You know, early on in my career, I was throwing 25 to 30 pitches, which, you know, you add that up, you're throwing a ton of pitches. So I've always tried to kind of narrow that down to about 15. And it kind of stays roughly around 15 to 18, ideally. But, you know, long innings, you know, things happen in the game that you can't control.
What about the mental switch? So, like, when the pressure's on, big situation, how do you put yourself in that mindset? Is that just something that comes natural to you? Have you had to really work on being able to, like, have a game face, or like, do you have any way to like mentally lock in for those high pressure situations compared to like you know, a spring training scrimmage or something?
Yeah, I would say for me, the pressure situations have always been pretty easy to kind of click onto. There's not anything specifically that I'm thinking about. You know, I think it's just your competitive nature just kind of takes over. I would say there's times where, you know, it's a different scenario where you kind of got to lock it in because the pressure situation is not there. But I would say the mentality of it is it's all the same, right? Like you try to, and I think this is where the mental game of baseball comes in, and it's actually a really intriguing thing to kind of learn and dive into, because there's a lot that you can dive into in the mental side. But for me personally, it's really just trying to replicate every single scenario as the same, just controlling what you can control, making sure you're staying with one pitch at a time, and really just for me, I call it the FU energy. Every single time you go out there, just really just trying to dominate everybody, and it's just you and the catcher. You're not really thinking about who's up in the batter's box or anything like that. So for me, it's just treating everything as the same.
You a big breath guy? Like, are you leveraging the breath every time, no matter what, as like a reset or as a routine part of your pre-pitch?
100%. Yeah, the breath is the key to the nervous system, right? I think there's a lot of times when if you get into your short breaths, that's when you kind of speed the nervous system up, and you get into that fight or flight mode. You know, I think there's a lot of things where you get to that long inhale, exhale, that kind of resets everything to where you're able to kind of calm your body down, stay in the moment, and you're able to kind of think clearly.
You think that FU energy can be taught, or do you think you've always had that competitive nature?
For me, I've always kind of had that competitive like nature where I'm just like kind of just like get after it. I think it could be taught in different ways. I think every human's different, right? And it goes just even with pitch grips and cues and everything. It's different ways to get that mind and that body to kind of switch over. And when you find that and what works best for you, that's how you're gonna do it. There's a lot of guys that kind of, you know, talk differently to themselves to kind of get them in that angry competitive state. And there's a lot of guys that, you know, don't use that same, but they can still get into that mindset.
Awesome. Any final thoughts? Maybe advice to younger pitchers?
Well, we're in a different age now, but for me, I would say not to try and chase velo, but that's where the game's headed to, right? You know, for me, I think command is ultimately more important because you can throw 97 to 100, but if you're not even in the zone, to hone in on the basics, I would say when you get wrapped up in chasing the velocity, you tend to get out of your core values of the mechanics. And I think it's also different for everybody, right? Everybody's a little bit different. But for me, as you know, the way I've kind of looked at the game of baseball, it's try and simplify the delivery and try and be as efficient as possible.
Awesome, Josh. Well, appreciate it, man.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for the interview. Let's go get after it.
Let's go.